everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Gamut Network. We really have been trying to seed in different types of interviews with different types of people that come and approach the population of people with disabilities from all angles. And this amazing man that I have on the show today, Brian, is not only personally affected, but also is directing his professional career as well to inclusion in the truest sense of that word. So with that, Brian, welcome to the show. It's so nice to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you too, Mindy. Thank you for having me.
I
have to say, I've tried to figure out the camera angle. I promise that I'm not a person who stands sideways, even though I'd be fine if you are. I just can't figure out how to get the framing right.
Not to worry. We love sideways people, straight people, crooked people, whatever it is. You're perfect.
I love it.
Brian, can you share with us your personal background and story? Because it really weaves in so many different topics, all in one person. So I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I love the opportunities I get to share my story. I've learned from so many people that when we share our stories, it helps them feel seen and heard. And so I have a commitment to sharing my story. So thank you for giving me the chance to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as a kid, I always felt different. I always felt like I just didn't quite fit in. And I used to think that it was because I was always what I like to joke as awkwardly tall and sort of so thin that you're like, please give him a sandwich. I was one of those tall kids. And so I always just felt a little different. The beautiful side of that, though, is partly because of my experience and partly because of my amazing parents. They taught myself and my sister that we should treat everyone with respect of who we are. And that I also just never wanted anyone else to feel like an outsider. So I think, from an early age, that's who I was, from a few different reasons. And then when I was in my college years, I came out and, accepted that I was a gay man. Thank you. And and I found that everyone in my life was accepting of me. So I sort of wish that it had been more dramatic sometimes. People are like, oh, cool. Are you dating anyone? And I'm like, well, no, dating's challenging. They're like, yeah, I know. And then like, when are we going to hang out? And I'm like, no, I just told you that I'm gay. And they're like, yeah, I don't care. Like, you're my friend.
Move on.
This is not big information for us. So I love that. And I was incredibly fortunate. However, I always felt that I always had this fear, I guess, of when I would enter corporate America. So my first career was in operations management, so field management, retail, restaurants. I worked in movie theaters. I find those environments tend to be so accepting. But I had a fear of corporate. And so when I went into corporate and started my first job in HR, I went back in the closet and found.
What year about are we talking here?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. So that would have been 99.
99. Okay.
So a little over 20 years ago.
Okay. Much different landscape of the world 20 years ago.
Well, and it was on the heels of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which of course is still an epidemic in its own right today in different ways. And we'll come back to that part of the story in a few minutes. But I think that was really before the real progress had been made to accept the LGBTQ+ community, and there's still a lot of work to be done. I think gay white men, which is where I happen to fall on the spectrum, are very well accepted today. If you talk to other members of the community who are people of color or who might fit in some of those other letters, they don't necessarily always feel that same acceptance or ability to come out. So I've been very fortunate with the work that's happened over the last 20 plus years. I was also really fortunate in my first role in HR. I had a mentor who was one of my managers who also happened to be an out gay man. Well, I wasn't out at that particular moment, but he figured out that I was gay. He helped me know I could be me and be successful. And he helped me identify leaders in the company who were also out and successful. And one of the top leaders of that company, and this was Red Lobster, was an out lesbian woman, and she was one of the top 7 members of that leadership team. So I learned early on that I could be me and I could be out, and be successful and have a career. So that was really fortunate. And so my career over the last 20 plus years has very much focused on, it's been in human resources, and it has always had elements of diversity and inclusion infused in it. And then over the course of my journey, I've had some other life experiences that have really shaped how I see the world. I've battled anxiety and depression for most of my adult life, and we could probably say some of it probably happened in my earlier life. It was more of I was diagnosed as an adult.
Exactly.
And
name now.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I've had moments where it was debilitating, and it took me out of the game in so many ways.
And so what age? I understanding that you probably
sure.
younger age, but when did it really debilitate? Where were we in your life cycle?
Yeah, the first time that I remember it being truly significant was when I made the move to New York City. So I was, and I say that's the time I remember. It probably happened at other times, but that's the first time that I really remember, because that was the first time I remember it was impacting my life and my ability to show up in everyday life. So I was 29. I was getting ready I was with Red Lobster, great company, great people. They had given me an opportunity to move from Orlando to an opportunity that was just outside of New York City in New Jersey. And in the 2 months leading up from the offer to the move, I fell apart, just fell apart. And so much so that I even went back to my old boss and said, can I have my old job back? I don't think I can do this. I was not thinking clearly. That mentor who I mentioned, who was the person who helped me come out, was still a good friend in my life. Unfortunately, he's passed since then, but at this point in time, he was still with us. And I remember having lunch with him one day, and I was just sort of gripped by this anxiety and this fear of what this move was going to be. And I remember him saying, Brian, you're going to mess this up. This is an amazing life experience. I know you're struggling, but you need to just put on your big boy pants and get there, get the help you need, and you're going to be okay. And so I'm really grateful for that moment, because I needed someone who just was that tough with me while also being caring. Like he and his children told me, well, I'm sorry, what was that?
Love, I believe they call it.
Tough love. Yes, absolutely. And his other kids, they were kids that, like, when he passed and we were all together, they're like, Brian, Kim, who was their father, thought of you as another kid. And so he could deliver that tough love in a way that I could receive it, because I knew innately that's how he felt about me. But it took a while. I remember when I got to New York City, I went to therapy, and I'm a big proponent of therapy. I've been in and out of therapy for now 15 plus years. And I'm really grateful for those therapists who've helped me on my journey. So I had therapy, and I had a psychiatrist who helped make sure that I had the right medicine to help with that journey. I'm a big believer, and I really encourage, and I'm not a medical expert, so I can't give medical advice, but anytime I hear someone getting medicine for that would be delivered by a psychiatrist from their primary care physician, I'm like, please go to see a psychiatrist, because there's experts who understand the chemistry of the brain and that medicine. So I'm really big on, like, have the right person do it, just because. And so really there was that help. And then I also found the New York City Gay Men's Chorus. And that was an essential element for me, because I needed community. I needed people who were there to accept me, and family, and they helped me get through it.
So I'm going to pause you just for 1 second, because I want to draw some parallels from other interviews that we've done. I hope those watching have seen the interviews that I'm referring to. But one thing I want to really point out is that we have had many guests on the show that have all different types of disabilities, that have also suffered from depression and anxiety. So whether you are able-bodied or you have a disability, depression doesn't care, and anxiety doesn't care. And we are all, again, it's another commonality in the fact that we're all human. And that is really what I want to get out of this show and what I want to show the world, that your story was very different than Danny Gomez, who had a spinal cord injury during his life. And he absolutely went through a period of depression and anxiety for different reasons, but same feeling, same debilitating, I don't know how I'm going to move forward in this life, that I needed to draw that parallel of your story, but also the notion of community. And whether that is the community of the what was it called, the Gay Men's Chorus,
The New York City Gay Men's Chorus, yeah.
which I'm dying to hear more about. But that sense of community and being surrounded by people that truly understand you, that really empathize with what is your journey is so important. Again, I cannot say it enough. It just draws the similarity that we are all human. Disability, no disability, it's the same, which is one of the reasons why I was so thrilled to have you on the show, is because I think it's really important to draw those parallels, that it's a barrier, whether you are in a wheelchair, have a limb difference, are cognitively impaired. That's a barrier to certain things in life. Depression and anxiety is a barrier to certain things in life, and other aspects that you're going to share with us in the story that's coming up are certainly, I'm sure, have been hurdles that you need to get over. So we'll continue, but I just wanted to just underline the importance of that.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I agree with you in that, and it's something that I'm known for talking about, is that we are all human. We all have our stuff. We all make mistakes. We all try. We all want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to see ourselves in the world around us. These are I've started calling them human truths. It's a phrase I'm trying out, but there are just things that are universal regardless of what makes us different. But there are things that we all want to experience.
Absolutely.
So I love that parallel, and it reminds me of one of my, particularly when I think about these dimensions of who we are that are invisible to others unless we choose to share them. It reminds me of this, one of those meme quotes that we all see around, which is, be kind. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Like that speaks to me, because I'm that person who, as much as I've learned to meditate and to breathe and to ask for help when I realize like I might be telling myself a story that's not true. What's the story I'm telling myself? Sometimes that, as I've heard someone talk about it, the board of directors in my head is like setting me all sorts of different directions and signals of alert and alarm, that maybe the actual reality is not that way. So yeah, so it's that being kind, you never know what battle someone's fighting. It's so true, and it's often true for me, and I have to keep myself in a good place, because as much as anxiety and depression hasn't been debilitating for me for a while, it's still an undercurrent, right? It's still there. I think the next time, though, that I really sort of, back to your earlier question of when did I experience it, the next time I really experienced a true debilitating episode was, I was probably 33, I think, and it was when I was diagnosed as being HIV positive. The good news that I came to understand, was the advances of medicine, and what science has offered for us is my life I'll live the same life as I would have before, with the reality that I have to take medication, and I have to take care of my health in a different way. But I still have the same life expectancy, same opportunities, but to exist and to do things in my life. Now, that what's interesting is that may be true. I learned that was true. And then what I also learned was what I wanted was different. Because I faced a moment of where I thought, I think I faced mortality in a different way. Yes. Because all of the messages of what the AIDS crisis was like, I was a kid during that period in the 80s and 90s, but I read the news, and I saw the news, and I saw things on TV.
Right? There was no escaping it.
Right. And so the stigma, the fear, the loss of life, all of a sudden it became incredibly real for me. And that was, that was a time. And when I look back on it, where with the intersection of the anxiety and depression that was really triggered by that event, I was not showing up to work in a way that was worthwhile, I think, to anyone. But I was also so afraid of talking about it. And so I left my colleagues in the dark, and they're like, Brian isn't Brian. We can see that. We don't know why. And what I talk about in the work that I do from an HR perspective, or change management perspective, is if we don't tell the story, then people will create their own story, and their own story is going to be terrible. Always.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Let's pause on that for a second, because I think that's really powerful and really important, especially, I'm going to take it from now your HR work and role, because I think that we are growing. I think we're not quite there yet, but there are so many people in our workforce that are terrified to share their story, whether that is that they have a disability or are HIV positive, what have you. But it's really about the notion of creating the comfort, the safe zone. One of the things that you graciously included me in was this amazing talk with Jennifer Brown about the fact of how do we bring things out, even in job requests or interviewing people. How do we make it feel safe that somebody like my son Oliver, when he gets to the age of applying for a job, that he can, in his parenthesis next to his name, say muscular dystrophy, next to the he, him, or whatever he chooses to be at that stage of the game.
Sure.
But it's that notion of that comfort level. And from an HR perspective, do you think that we are making strides to not only for new employees coming in or job descriptions going out, but those that are in our workforce that have been so scared to tell the human truth of if they do have a disability because they're worried about the stigma or an underlying disease, etc. Do you think it's getting better? Do you think we're creating a workforce that is going to feel comfortable in that setting?
It's a good question, and it's a hard question. But first I want to share two short stories, and then I'm going to come back to that question because I think it'll all come together. So the first is this moment that I had with another person in my life. I was at a dinner table there were four of us at the dinner table. I happened to talk about being positive, and probably in the context of dating and disclosure and dating, and it's a complicated arena. But I have the utmost respect for other humans, and so we were just having that conversation about how do I navigate that. One of my friends at that table the next day texted me and said, "Hey, can I come by?" I don't know if he'd ever been to my apartment. If he had, it'd been for like a group gathering, and he came by, and I opened the door, and he just started crying. And he said, I was like, come in, how are you? What's going on? And he said, Brian, I've never heard someone so openly talk about the fact that they're HIV positive without fear or without all of this shame that comes with that. And he said, I didn't even know I needed to hear that. So that personal moment was really poignant for me. And then the other story I'll share, which is more of a general story, but it's something that I've experienced as I've been on stages in the last couple of years and have had the opportunity to share about my experiences with anxiety and depression. It never fails. I do it for the sake of people in the room who might need to hear that. And it never fails. I get emails from several people each time to say, thank you for sharing that you have this mental health battle. and that it's given me courage to share my story.
Yeah.
And so I've had these experiences both in my personal and professional life where I've realized that, particularly for these stories that are invisible to others, we have to hear. I encourage people to take the responsibility and have the courage to share their stories, because it connects more of us than what we've had the opportunity to appreciate. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to have those moments. You know, when I think about those moments on a very human, from the very human perspective, then I sort of take that to the corporate perspective. Do I think we're making progress? Yes, I do. And there are some companies and industries that are really trying to make headway. And that said, I also think we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. But this is why when I created, as where you and I met, Mindy, I was the head of diversity and inclusion for Tapestry. For those of you who might not be familiar with Tapestry, it's the home of Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. This is when everyone's eyes light up, and they're like, yes, we love those brands. They are fabulous. And Tapestry is a great place to work. And it is a company that is really committed.
In Hudson Yards too, which is even.
In Hudson Yards, yes. Oh, yes. It's fashion at its height these days in Hudson Yards, right? And but it's also a company led by people who want everyone to feel welcome. And when we were creating our inclusion training, I included one of the messages I heard when I first met you, Mindy, on the panel of, and I know that you talk about this, is not for us, without us. So there is a slide in the training for all of our creative teams.
I love it. I'm so thrilled.
That says, and it uses another version of that quote, but it's the same message of, don't design for us without us in the room. Yeah. We need to be part of the conversation. What I also know is those creative teams, they're like, that makes so much sense. Like intellectually it makes sense, but also when you're trying to get it right, like it just makes sense of like, how do we want to meet the needs, we don't want to push them apart. So it was an organization that's so receptive to that conversation and that message. And the other message that I was a big champion of there was, also I heard on the panel with you, and I apologize that I've lost names because I can't remember who said what on the panel, but it was such a phenomenal panel about disability representation in fashion, for those of you who weren't in the room. But it was this: if you want to drive innovation, bring a person with a disability into the conversation. They've been hacking their world their entire life. And I love that. So I share it as many times as I can, because I want people to hear both of those messages are so important. So, when I think about a company like Tapestry, do I think that there are companies who are really trying and are making progress? Absolutely. I know you had a chance to work with the Tommy Hilfiger brand. Their adaptive line, I think, is incredible. And when the organizations are starting to make those choices, I think that's phenomenal. And I could probably point to other, industries and organizations. Those are two that sort of pop for me because I have a personal experience with both of them. So I'm excited that it's happening. I also think, it's going to take all of us that do this work and play in this space and have the opportunity. I say that I'm grateful I get to do this work. It is the hardest work I've done in my entire life.
I'm so sure. I can't even imagine.
It's so hard.
Right now, too. We're trying to figure out this new normal of working virtually and with masks on and all of that fun stuff. But I also truly believe, and I know this is something we spoke about the other day, that there's definitely going to be some silver linings that are going to come out of the pandemic, especially for people with disabilities, that we can, I'd love to segue into what you're doing now. Sure. With Hummingbird Humanity, in that I think it will be discovered, even though it is something that has always been discovered, but clarified, that people with disabilities have incredible value in our workforce. And their production is 2 times the amount of an able-bodied person, because they take their work so seriously and are so grateful to work. But I think now the notion that we can actually get a lot done without having to physically be together, will only benefit those that physically it's challenging for them to go to an office or go on an interview or what have you. And I know with that you are now the CEO and founder of Hummingbird Humanity, and just tell us a little bit about what the organization does, because I think it folds in so beautifully to really helping companies understand the mankindness of what our new world is going to be like.
Or the human kindness.
Human kindness, woman kindness, they
Absolutely. They kind, exactly. All the kindnesses.
all the kindnesses.
You know what, and I actually love, and I want to answer your question, but I love that we are all now, many of us are aware of the importance of those pronouns.
Yeah.
It's because there's a whole community of people who are championing for us to be able to acknowledge and see everyone else. And that's where this conversation hopefully does. And the work you're doing is helping people to see this community. And you're not alone. There's lots of us that are with you. So I think that's so important. So, and that's really the spirit behind Hummingbird Humanity. So if you'll indulge me, I think I'll read the mission statement, and then we can add a little.
Very powerful. I think it needs to be read.
Awesome, thank you. So it's, here we go. Hummingbird Humanity believes that putting people first is essential to the success of any business. We partner with organizations to foster human-centered, highly engaging workplace cultures where representation matters, diverse voices are celebrated, and everyone feels valued.
It's so beautiful and so perfect, and I think that it is absolutely going to be, the mission statement of our world, so to speak, in terms of how we need to come out of this. That there was nobody could escape it, really, in terms of COVID-19. Yes, there's high risk categories, but everybody could potentially get the disease. And I think that's why, we are all involved in something that will hopefully never happen again in our lifetime. But what a beautiful way to come out of this in recognizing that everybody deserves to have their voice heard and to have respect and opportunity the same as any other person or human in this world. And I think Hummingbird Humanity it seems that that's exactly what you're striving for.
It is absolutely. And and I think about well, yeah, I've shared some of my personal experiences that have led me to this place, and love the work that I get to do. And then the other thing that I think about is who do I admire who's already leading the way in the world, and what companies. And the one company that I'll just highlight, because I know they've done work in the specific space with people with disabilities, is Target Corporation.
Oh, boss, I love them.
Target's amazing. Like, I remember seeing, well, one of the things that I loved, which isn't specifically in this community, although there are people of color who are in the disabled community as well, right? Target produced or sold wrapping paper in the holiday season that depicted Santas of different color skins.
Love it.
I just had a moment when I saw that. I said, wait, and I grew up in a world where all the Santas were white. And that's what I remember. I may have seen a Santa that wasn't white along the way, but I said, wait a second. I actually don't believe that Santa had to be white, or, I'm someone who sort of says, I realize that there's these urban legends that get sort of, modified over the course of time to meet whatever needs. I love that they said, wait, we don't have to buy into that. We can think about it differently. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing a story a few months ago about a sign they have in their stores that is a young man in a wheelchair. And there's this parent who is there with her son, who I think it was, who's in a wheelchair. And they just stop. And the son is like, I see myself on this sign. Everyone deserves that experience, whether it's the experience I had at the beginning of my career when I understood that one of the top leaders at my company was an out lesbian woman who was very successful, or whether it's someone in the Black African American community who gets to see Michael Jordan as the face of Coach Men's, or whether it's that little boy in the wheelchair who gets to see his sign, himself depicted in a sign. Everyone deserves to see that and to know that the world accepts them and sees them.
Absolutely. It's pop culture.
Right.
It's really what is driving, you know, what is normal or typical. And I think we have to really take a step back now and really look at what is normal, what who are consumers, what do they look like, and they come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. And that is something that I really think will be on the forefront of the next chapter of our world. And by the way, if you want to find out the behind the scenes story of that young boy, that was in the advertisement. He's actually a Gamut model, and he was on the show a couple of weeks ago. His name is Colton Robinson. He's amazing. So definitely check out that episode of the Gamut Network because it's an absolutely magnificent story. So Brian, what, as it relates to Hummingbird Humanity, what are your ultimate goals? Who or what? And actually, you know what? Hang on, because I'm going to fold it into our last question, which is about the notion of a vision board, and manifesting what you want to happen in your lifetime. I, of course, am sitting on a couch next to Ellen on my vision board. I'm doing an interview with Oprah. This show is on an actual network. All these things I intend to happen in my lifetime. Who or what would be on your vision board?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think both of those questions do come together very nicely. Yeah, and which probably doesn't surprise you. You know me well, and you know, it's recently. Well, so look, there's a couple things that I'm working on. I'm working on writing a book on humanity in the workplace.
Love it.
And really bringing these concepts to life. Sometimes the conversations are a series of books. Sometimes the conversations are one book. So we'll see. We should start with one, though.
Start with one.
And I do want to get on stages, and I'm a performer at heart, and I love to do this work. And so really what I want to do is to find ways and opportunities to be a champion for representation, for diverse voices, for organizations that operate from human first thinking of, you know, we all, you know, how do we support mind, body and spirit wellness in our companies? How do we help everyone get, you know, see themselves in the organization and everything we do? So, you know, I want this to be a movement, and I would want to be one of the voices that is really helping to really champion that movement. So if I was going to say, like, what's the big vision besides like taking that to the next level, is I want to be Oprah and Ellen. I want to be that person.
So maybe we'll combine.
I love it. I love it.
It's a show.
Yeah, I've actually, the other day after I started my, I think I've mentioned this to you. I'm now doing a series of conversations called Hope, Heart, and the Human Spirit. On Wednesdays at 3 p.m. You can find out more at hummingbirdhumanity.com. And as I've started doing those, I've said, wait, it's not, I wouldn't want to call it a talk show host probably, because I feel like it's a little bit more human, although Oprah does incredible humanity as a talk show host. So I don't want to discount that, the amazing work she does. So I'm like, maybe that's what I want to do, is I want to find ways to help people tell their stories powerfully. And maybe that means I will get to be a talk show host, and share, you know, with amazing individuals like Ellen and Oprah and others, Kelly Clarkson, who I think is one of the most human humans.
I completely agree, and I love that she has her own show.
Yeah, exactly, and I just love that she's just real. So I think that's kind of the goal now, is to see if that's what I can manifest as I take these next steps in this work.
Love it. I love it. And I know that you will do it. Brian, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you? Should they have more questions? Should they want to know about Hummingbird Humanity? What's the best contact or way to connect?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the website is www.hummingbirdhumanity.com. So fairly straightforward. You can also email me at brian@hummingbirdhumanity.com. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn just to see what I'm up to, it's Brian McComak on LinkedIn, and I'll spell my last name for you because it's unique. So it's Brian with an I, Brian, and last name is McComak. Brian McComak. So and feel free to reach out. Happy to connect with anyone who has questions, or if you're just curious about what I'm doing, feel free to connect so you can see what I'm up to. And I love connecting with fellow champions, where we need everyone to do this work together.
It really does take a village.
It does.
A bigger village. It takes a city.
We need an entire city. Okay, actually, we need a country of people all doing this.
Maybe a continent. I don't know. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It was so interesting. Amazing conversation. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story and all of the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. And I mean, ditto to you, of course. Like, I really do think sometimes I get a little bit overwhelmed that we're like, what I'm trying to do by myself. But I say, wait, I'm not doing this alone.
You're not.
There are people like Mindy and Jennifer Brown and Aaron Thomas, who is one of my favorite people, and all these wonderful people. There's so many of us doing this work, and that together we can do this. So thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share my story. I hope it's helped someone.
Absolutely, definitely. If you would like to be on the Gamut Network, please email us at talent@gamutmanagement.com and tell us why you'd be a great guest. Please also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Gamut Network, as well as follow us on our social channels of Gamut Management. Thank you again, Brian.
Thanks, Mindy. Bye-bye.
Bye.